Hi, Kevin here. Today I will present you a framework which is called the Explorer framework, and this is an approach to come from problems and instead of thinking them as problems, thinking it more as ecosystems. So let's begin. So before I go into the details of what is the framework on itself, I have first to link back two main topics that prompted the idea around this framework. The first is, so the two are design and innovation. And the idea is to link them together, so that the framework actually makes sense for both a design and innovation approach. First, what is design? And this is really how I define it. But for me, design is any process or activity that involves the creation of a medium for interactions to crystallize changes or behaviors. This is, to me, important to frame it this way because it allows us to broaden up what design can do and how it can be used in reality. Oftentimes we will have quite, not necessarily narrow, but definitions that fit context. Here, the context is embedded, the idea of context is embedded in the definition. It does not follow the context. The definition does not follow any particular context. So say design is not the creation of artifacts for products, for instance, which is a context dependent definition. Here the definition is takes into account the fact that different contexts might require different type of thing that a designer and that design serves. And in this situation, we can imagine that a medium for interaction can be anything as physical, digital, virtual, but it can be also more informal, with less clear borders, like say a process or any form of organization, agreements between parties is a form of design of interactions between parties, and it is meant to, canalize and crystallize part of the interactions. And those interactions, we hope that at some point they lead to a better situation or an improved situation. So that's how I define it. Innovation, on the other hand, is, to me, yet again, it's my definition, any significant positive impacts or changes in a given context, usually the context we are acting in. What it means to me, and this is really important, is that innovation is something that we can only define as afterwards. We can only realize that innovation happened. We cannot do per se innovation. It's not something in the present. is something in the near past. We have to see the change that had already occurred to say it's an innovation. Something is an innovation. What is important here is that I removed any kind of sense of solution or concrete thing. To me, we can do innovation without creating a product or services. It can be many things in parallel that leads to changes that innovated the context, that changed it in a significant positive way. And I say positive, it's always in regard to whatever point of reference we are taking in this given context. So say the iPhone alone did not innovate how we consume information. It's the accumulation of different factors at a given time in a given context that led to this innovation. If it hasn't been the iPhone, it would have been something else, because many factors were there for this to happen. It was just the tipping point. The moment of tipping point was uncertain, and we'll say in a certain way the iPhone crystallized part of them. But that's an example. So this allows us to see design and innovation as two things that are in the same continuum. Design is the creation of a medium of interactions, and innovation is the realization of the change. It's usually through the means of a medium or several mediums that we will realize innovation. So that's the idea of linking the two together. It's really important. And now I will explain how this relates to the Explorer framework, and we'll talk about metaphors. Metaphors are, I think, a key component of the framework, because the framework, in a sense, is not prescriptive of any particular methodology or tools or stuff like that. It's more a way to approach your challenges, and to reframe your point of view on how those challenges can be understood. And everything started with me working on a project with colleagues that were not designers. They were product owners and business analysts, and there was this willingness in the project to use design thinking as an approach to the project to better understand the challenge and what is the current landscape, and how we can change it in a positive way, given the fact that some of part of the solution were, in those kind of projects, the solution is already somehow kind of defined. But the idea was how could we take these requirements, these high-level ideas of what should be done, and go on the field and understand how we can probably better either reframe it or frame it in a better way, so that we are sure that we tackle real challenges. And that requires a good understanding of the context, of the actors of this context, of what generates whatever frustration or pain points that led to the creation of this project, and the needs that are written in the description of this project. But the problem was that at this time it was hard for everyone to understand how useful design thinking, whether we like the approach or not, how useful it could be for them to gain this understanding, this especially a multi-layered understanding of the context, which means that different actors doing different things in the same space, things that are related together, but sometimes in a more tacit way, informal way, but it was not obvious right at the beginning. And I came with this idea, which I did not invent. It's something that I read somewhere, using this metaphor of exploration, and you will see later islands. It's not something new. I did not invented them, but I used the metaphor in this context. I reframed it and I reused it. I reuse it in a way that's better explain what can be gained in such an approach. And the idea for me was to go beyond the inherent biases of people working in an organization, where they are requested to scope the project and plan for it and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not necessarily the right way to do it, but that's the reality in most organizations. And this leads to motivated, what we call motivated reasoning. And those kind of motivated reasoning creates the bias that we see usually in projects, where people just look for confirmation of what they already think. They are not checking that on the field, if what they think is reality is actually reality, and how it is perceived by others, which is a really important point. And so this idea of using curiosity as a driver to pass those biases, go beyond them, and be less problem solvers, where there's we assume that the problem is well understood and well defined, and that there is an answer to the problem, a solution. And being more like explorers, like curious explorers, that with a genuine willingness to discover things, understand them from different point of views. And so as I mentioned earlier, this is linked to this idea of discovering islands, and we explain how it's linked together. So I came to with this idea of using the explorer metaphor, and how I explain it is basically you are like an explorer on a boat, and you are navigating seas, and in the horizon you see an island, and this island might be your challenge. It can be also your organization. You can choose how you define the boundaries of whatever the island should be. But this idea of materializing this challenge or this context in a way that you might find borders and you might find things in the middle. Especially what is interesting with islands is that they're autonomous as an ecosystem within the island, but also so much dependent on whatever is around them, like the kind of sea and how deep is it, or the kind of weather that impacts the ecosystem and stuff like that. And we can imagine that you can have like several islands next together, organized as archipelagos, which allows us to group together similar challenges, so things that are related, but also that are different. What is interesting with archipelagos in real life is that an island might be, really green and has a lot of vegetation and a really complex ecosystem living there, and the island next to it is a desert with just rocks and dust and that's it. And those two islands share the same base, which is the ocean floor and probably the ocean, the same ocean space, the same ocean ecosystem and stuff like that. So this is what is interesting there, is that as an explorer, seeing this island from where you are, you can say that this island is maybe big or small. It has maybe some, like mountains or volcanoes, stuff like that. But you cannot really say in details how this island is composed and how this composition is, what are the relationships between the different elements of the island. You might not be able even to see all the elements that composes this island. So it's a good metaphor to a challenge, that we can get quickly a sense of what is the challenge with an explanation, or by discussing with people. But that doesn't mean that you understand all the things that happens within this challenge and how this challenge has specificities and stuff like that. So let's say you arrive on the beach of this island, one of the beach of this island, and you want to explore it. You want to know more about this island and what kind of if there's any people living there, what are the resources, where do you find foods and fresh water and stuff like that. What is interesting there is that the metaphor applies to the discoverability of the challenge itself, because when you start on the beach and you say, okay, now we'll explore the island, you have to choose a path to start with, right? You cannot, you are alone or you are with a small group of people, and you cannot right away split everyone and say everyone goes in one direction, and we'll try to explore the island in one day, and at the end of the day we understand everything about this island. It doesn't work like that, right? So you choose a path and you will start exploring there, and you will discover maybe this nice waterfall, and maybe a spot for building your camp and continuing exploration. But this gives you just a narrow, window on what is this island, because this is not because you now see how this part of the forest of the island is composed, and how it works, that you understand the island. Because it might be the case that on the other side of the island, it's it's a desert, or maybe on top of one of the mountains you have a lake, and you cannot know about it. Or the vegetation is totally different from this side of the island to the other side of the island. You don't know. You don't know, and you cannot make assumptions about the island on its whole based on what you know of this narrow spot, right? So what is interesting with this idea of having, thinking of challenges as islands, and you and your team as explorers, is that you can think in terms of, you can use the things we use to understand a real landscape, which is namely topography and ecosystems. What is interesting there is like your island can have, like, as I said before, like mountains, and there's the beaches, the mountain, and the forests, and stuff like that. And as in real life, you can imagine that those this topography influences how the ecosystem, and say the forest and the creatures there, the animals living there, is either moving or evolving in the island. So, for instance, for the case of a challenge, you might have, like, highly structural elements of your challenge. Let's say that you are working in an organization and you are trying to understand a challenge within the organization itself, and you might say that how the IT infrastructure and the formal hierarchy of the organization are highly structural to your challenge. And it might be the case that there are mountains and cliffs and structural elements like in this example of topography. And this will influence how information moves within the context of a challenge. And this might come to your understanding that the information moves in a certain way, that some key actors of the landscape becomes like nevralgic point to how the information is diffused within the rest of the actors of the context of the landscape, and understanding that might be really key to whatever actions you want to take in the future. So, linked to that idea, and the fact that you cannot have this understanding of the whole, because you cannot, as a one single person or a group of small people, humanly have this neutral, objective point of view, because you are influenced by whatever things you know, whatever prior experience you have, and your motivations and stuff like that. So everyone will have a piece of a perspective on it. And what we want to do to understand the island is to broaden up our understanding by not being the only person who has a say on what exactly is the landscape. And you might want to, this is when you might want to create what we call a sensory network, is a network of people that informs you on how and what is the actual context from their own perspective. And the idea is to come to this network of people that can give you like a view on this part of the island, and they will speak for, maybe they will be good average of what this part of the island is as a perspective for a, imagine that in this part of the island you have like 100 people. You want to have a good average of what is this part of the island, and basically you want each point of your network to be good average of what is the landscape. You don't want to miss neither some extremes of what could be the good explanation for what is the context. But this is basically what you are aiming for, is creating this connection between people to help you draw a good enough map. The map itself is not really important. In fact, it's more what it allows you to do, to take, to act. And yeah, so this sensory network can brings you a finer and more detailed understanding. And the advantage of using this network is that you, instead of doing an interpretation of what actually those people are living as an experience of the context of the landscape, that you remove this weight of your shoulders and you bring it back to the network, and you let them basically do the interpretation for you, because it's most probably the case that they will have, because of their experience of the challenge, they will have a better interpretation of it, and one that at least is in line with their experience of the challenge or the context. So behind this sensory network, there's this idea of data, retrieving data about the context, and what we are looking for is especially stories that bring with them meaning that you can only gain through a contextualization of the data. So data itself is interesting, but what we want here is to connect data with the context, something that is important to understand why people are taking the decision they are taking right now in the context, and what are their understanding of the context. Is through stories you ensure that they bring their perspective and how they make the connection between what they see and what they do. So this is really important. And beyond that, there's this idea of seeing data and stories and stuff like that as energy. And One idea there is that when you think of the data as energy, you can think on how you will retrieve and use this data as if you were trying to handle energy. So what is interesting with energy is that it can have different states, and it can be transferred to different type of action. So what we call work in a closed system. For instance, a heat machine that moves the wheels of a train. A steam machine, sorry, that moves the wheels of a train. We transform heat energy in kinetic energy, and this has been done through vectors of energy. And so if we think of gathering data as a form of transformation of energy, yes, because what I didn't say before is that one key concept with energy is that it cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed, it can only be transformed. And this is what data actually, this is how we can see data, is that data is here, we don't create it, we transform it from what people know, how they tell us, how we interpret it, and how we formalize it, and then how we use it. And in the end, the result of this use of data but transform the data into something else, right? And this something else will lead to a different kind of data that will be the result of whatever we did from the learning we had. And as I was saying, seeing data as energy, we can see how we can gather data and we can retrieve data. And there's two really key important aspects of it, is that a vector of energy, this is a medium through which energy can go through and be transferred. For instance, electricity is a vector of energy. It's not energy itself. It transfers energy. It's a medium. And the medium through which energy will move actually defines a lot of things. It defines how energy will be, all the losses of energy in the system will be explained by the medium. The medium will has different effects on so energy losses, the kind of output you can have with this medium, the type of I'm thinking of it, but it doesn't come. Okay, so basically that's it. And if you see the data gathering as medium for energy, you understand that if you play with the type of mediums, you play with how you can collect data and what kind of understanding you can have from it. For instance, an informal discussion is a medium for an exchange of information. It's a medium for data that allows high level of forgiveness and a high level of interpretation, because during an informal discussion, for instance, a person can vehiculate a lot more things with what he's explaining to you, and he will have cues on how well we get what he's trying to say. he will be able to give more richness in information with this with what he's trying to say. So it opens up the it broadens up the what we allow as information to come in, but as a result, it also increases the noise in the system. On the other hand, formal questionnaire or survey with already predefined questions and predefined type of answers we want to have is a highly formal way to retrieve data, and it reduces noise because we only get what we ask for, but then it reduces the ability to create understanding or meaning of the data. So we only have what we expect. But in the first case, we can retrieve information that we would never expect to retrieve and discover a lot more things. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It really depends on what type of information and what kind of use you want to make with this information, with those information. But this is really important. And some aspect of it is obviously how the system of gathering this information is. It's, for instance, if I'm in an informal discussion with you, it will be a synchronous state. So we will be together to discuss. I can interact with you directly, and if I'm in, for say the example of the survey, I can send it to you. You can reply to it later through websites, for instance. I don't have to be there all the time to guide you through, and you don't need me to ask questions, for instance. So this is asynchronous. And what we have to understand is, as we build a sensory network, we don't want to use this network in a synchronous way all the time. Synchronicity is especially needed when we are in an inquiry mode where we are looking for understanding or information. This is really good to be connected, to be synchronous. But if you are only in that kind of state with your network, you will use it too much, and it might be the case that people don't want to be engaged anymore in the end. So you want to vary it to move between synchronicity and asynchronicity. And asynchronicity is really interesting in terms of a sensory network, because you could give some indication of what kind of signals you are looking for within your landscape, and just provide a medium for your network to notify you of what they see, or what they understand of the context when those signals appeared. For instance, you can give a set of really basic rules, and it will trigger a response from your network in a synchronous way. So then you can go in a synchronous mode where you can ask more questions about it, and so you have to move between the two, and it is really important to understand that. Finally, all of that is for the sake of finding direction. So when you are trying to tackle a challenge, you don't know what is the good direction yet. all this work of creating this network and exploring the islands is to find direction, is to find a good enough way to kick the challenge in the right direction. And how can you do that is by probing your network and doing experiments in the landscape. And this is really two key factors there. What is important to note is that it might be the case that different, not necessarily solutions, but let's use this term. It might be the case that in your context, as it is a complex situation, different solutions could be seen as good solutions, and you don't know which one to choose. And it might be the case that you don't have to choose. So, for instance, you could probe your network about this or that solution or approach, and that might tell you that for both it seems that it's good solutions. So probing is not necessarily always enough. But then what you can do is thinking of what kind of experiments you can put in place where you can try out those approaches in context, so you have a sense of what kind of results those approaches give you. And you could also imagine that you build something that we call a portfolio of strategies, that instead of speaking of solutions, you speak about strategies, and you say, oh, there's several things we can do there. They all seems valid. It seems that it will impact positively the challenge in general, and you don't have to choose. You don't say, oh, we pick this one and that's it, and this is our single strategy, because you don't have any fallback. If it fails catastrophically, and you don't always want to tackle a problem directly, because although it seems like intuitive, it might be the case that you will have much more. It's much more likely that you will change the context by working on different aspects of the context, because sometimes problems arise because of the context, not because of a specific thing you can act on. And so thinking of portfolio strategies is thinking about direction. You say you want to change this situation, but it's not by just implementing a digital product that this situation will improve. It's by, alongside with different little actions, you can influence the context and the situation and change it in different ways that altogether increases the chances of positive impacts. And this is what you want to see in your channel, in your context, right? So it's not just problem solution. We are talking about complex challenges in complex situations with a lot of interconnectedness. And in this case, in this type of approach, you cannot just say, oh, we'll develop a product and it will solve everything, right? And what is important also is that you are monitoring the type of impact you are creating. So what is important to understand is, as soon as you are part of the challenge, as soon as you try to understand and influence it. And the fact that people in this context know that you are trying to do something about it will already change a bit how will change a bit the challenge. It will change a bit how people behave. It will change a bit a lot of things, how people sensitive to some signals and stuff like that. As soon as you start doing something, prior to that doing, you want to be sure that you have good enough evaluation criteria so that you know if you are going in the right direction, if what you are doing actually brings the type of things you want to see. And for that, there's this idea of repurposing your network, that as soon as you understand what you have a good enough understanding of the context enough to start doing something, that you prompt your network to give you criteria of what they would like to see or the type of effects they expect from the landscape that indicates that you are moving in the right direction. And this is where you repurpose this network that was initially for sensory input to evaluative mode, and they will tell you, then you will rely on them to monitor the impacts, and you will rely on them to what is the term? Interpret what they are saying in the context and tell you if it moves in the right direction, right? So this way you build ownership of whatever actions you are trying to do in your landscape to the people that live in the landscape. It will create more engagement from them. It will create also a new channel of information, and it will allows you to not be not find yourself in this situation where people think you are the only one who can answer questions. The fact is that diffusing this responsibility of understanding, this ensure that one person or a small group of people are not applying their biases over the situation. Okay, and I think it's critical. It's ethical and it's critical. So now the question is, what is your island? And if so, what is its ecosystem? And I leave you with that question, and I let you explore more of the framework by entering this link to your browser, explore.designcriticalthinking.com, and you will find a guide. It's a small guide. It's not really much more than what we just discussed now, but at least it's something where you can come back again and again and see how you can interpret and use that those ideas in your context, right? So I hope that you find this interesting. It's the first time I do this kind of format, so I'm not so, you see, I was not so confident. I hope that you find it interesting anyway, and don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel. Don't hesitate also to go to designcriticalthinking.com. We have a blog where you can find some articles about the Explorer framework and what the community, design and critical thinking community, is doing. And yeah, I wish you a good time on this channel. See you soon. Bye.